Hokage give me a face. Conan, Chapter 61-80. Chapter 61 _ participate in a party at a 5-star hotel. After staying in the villa for a while, it was getting late soon. After Yizan had dinner, he returned to the bedroom. It's been a day since he went out on the 18th, and he hasn't come back yet. He can't help but miss Yizan a little. He took out an advanced video talker, and Yizan dialed the number on the 18th. These advanced technologies were brought over from the world of Dragon Ball on the 18th. Compared with the technologies in this world, I don't know how much stronger they are. They are not things that humans can recognize at all. 18 appeared on the screen of the video. She was in a research room and seemed to be studying something. After staying in this world for so long, the consortium of number 18 has already mastered countless money, and now number 18 has his own pursuit and is more keen on the research and development of technology. After seeing Yizan, number 18 smiled slightly and said, "Do you have anything to do with me now?" "Why, can't I find you if I have nothing to do?" Yizan also smiled and asked back. "Of course, you are my master, hee. Number 18's smile is so charming, like a flower blooming in the sun, so bright. After a few chats, Yizan still stated his purpose. He asked number 18, of course, he had something to help her. Sitting on the sofa, Yizan took a sip of coffee and said to number 18, Yuanzi was seriously injured today and has turned into a bead. I heard that she was injured by a monster. Help me find it. In this world, apart from you and me, who else has such a powerful energy to be able to seriously injure Sonoko? Quote. For Yizan, he and number 18 are unique existences in this world. There are people who can challenge their existence. Of course, they must be erased. After hearing the news, number 18 was not too surprised, but a sneer raised on the corner of his mouth. Really, if there really exists such a monster, it would be fun. I haven't done much for so many years. For a combat-type robot, it is not easy to be able to fight well, and now number 18 has such an idea. After talking about this matter, number 18 asked again, by the way, I heard that you and Conan broke a case today. How is it? How much has your destiny increased? The dead men and killers trained on the 18th have already spread all over the world. As long as she wants to know, she can know the whereabouts of national leaders, let alone Yizan. The 18th knew what happened today. Instead he smiled slightly and said, the increase in mental strength is of course huge. Every time a case is solved, I can feel it in my mind. Spiritual power is constantly increasing. Quote. The strength of his body, Yizan has reached the limit. He is the strongest being in the universe, but compared to the strongest body in the universe, his mental strength is too far behind. He needs to keep exercising, and the world of Conan is undoubtedly the one of the best options. Hearing Yizan's answer, number 18 also smiled slightly. That's the best case. I still have something to do, so I won't talk about it for now. I'll let you know as soon as I find out the results. Yeah, Yizan nodded, turned off the video, and began to practice his spiritual power. On the road of cultivation, the strength of the body, after reaching the limit, every strong person must cultivate spiritual power. After all, the potential in the brain has only been developed a little, and there is still a lot of room for improvement. When the mental power reaches a certain strength, it is very likely to reach the legendary realm, which is eternal and immortal. The night passed quickly, and when Yizan woke up again, it was already more than 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun shone from the windowsill, making the whole bedroom much brighter. In order to make his life more comfortable, number 18 specially invited a lot of servants to serve the two of them, but without the permission of Yizan and the others, these servants would not easily disturb Yizan and the others. After all, in the eyes of these servants, existences like Yizan and number 18 are the powerhouses at the peak of the world, and no one can surpass them. After getting dressed, Yizan walked out of the luxurious villa and came to the outside of the living room, where there were several beautiful maids who brought him breakfast and milk. Sitting at the dining table, Yizan had a good taste of the delicious breakfast, then wiped his mouth, picked up the newspaper and read it, wanting to look for it, there are some big cases recently, as long as he makes a move, these all cases can be resolved. Of course, what's more important is that Yi-zan wants to exercise his mental power through these cases. After a long time, Yi-zan didn't find out which cases were published in the newspapers. It seemed a little too peaceful. The world of 837 couldn't help but make Yi-zan feel a little bored. In the midst of boredom, Yi-zan's mobile phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and saw that it was from Maori and his family, and the number was still very familiar. Pressing the answer button, Yi-zan asked in a flat tone, "I'm Yi-zan, what's the matter?" Soon, a nervous voice from Maori came over the phone. "Yi-zan, that's it, I have something I want to discuss with you. I don't know if I can." Hearing Maori's tone, Yi-zan could guess that the discussion he said was probably not a good thing. But after all, the Shaolin that Yi-zan wants to conquer is Maori's daughter. It's not good to reject him like this. Yi-zan still nodded and said, "If you have something to say, just say it." After getting Yi-zan's permission, Maoli was very happy, and said quickly, "That's it, I have an important invitation this afternoon. Can you lend me your car? I want to drive to save face. After all, the other party is in 5-star hotel invites me." Quote. This is just a small request. If Yi-zan refused, it would be a little boring, so he replied, "No problem, I promise you, but I also have a request, let's go and have a look." Chapter 62-Troublemaker. He was very happy to be able to borrow the car. Of course, Maoli agreed quickly. What's more, he also hoped that Shaolin and Yi-zan could be together. If he had a rich and handsome son-in-law, Maoli would spend the rest of his life. There is a backer. After hanging up the phone, Yi-zan couldn't help showing a smile on his face. For Yi-zan, he didn't want to see something with Maori. It's just that Yi-zan knew from fate that this time Mori and Conan would encounter a case soon after going out. Isn't this an opportunity for him to exercise his fate? I have to say that living with the protagonist is colorful. As soon as the afternoon arrived, Yi-zan drove his top luxury car, left the villa, and rushed to Maori's house. Yi-zan has the wealth that makes the world fear. What kind of luxury car? What kind of luxury house? For him, it is nothing but an easy thing. Coming under the Maori detective agency, Yi-zan pressed the horn a few times. From the window, Maori immediately stuck out a head, looked at Yi-zan excitedly, and waved his hand. "Yi-zan, you are here, please. Just a moment, we'll be down right away." Yi-zan also opened the car window, smiled lightly at Maori, and said, "Don't worry, I'll be waiting for you here." Not long after, Maori put on a precious suit and walked downstairs, followed by Shaolan, who was well dressed, and Conan, who was still in a blue shirt and bow tie. Shaolan was wearing a purple dress, and she walked with a fragrance, pure and lively, which made Yi-zan take a few more glances. Only Conan was behind, his face was slightly calm, as if he was very dissatisfied, and he walked slowly. The three quickly walked to Yi-zan's car, and Maori said with a smile, "Wow, Yi-zan has changed his car again. This is a limited edition Rolls-Royce in the world. It is a blessing for 3 lifetimes to be able to ride in him." Ah! Saying that, Maori could not wait to get into the car, and there was a very happy expression on his face. Conan followed Shaolan, and the two sat behind the car. One smiled and looked at the window, while the other looked unhappy and seemed to have some opinions on Yi-zan. Yi-zan was too lazy to take care of Conan. With the observational power brought by his strong mental power, the title of Conan, a famous detective, would have to be changed to another owner. Driving, Yi-zan came to a luxurious hotel. The area alone was as big as several football fields. Such a top-level hotel is not so easy to see in the whole of Tokyo. The people who come and go here are not top celebrities, but there are rich people. Ordinary little people will not come to this kind of place to spend. The Rolls-Royce that Yi-zan was driving was the best pass. No one dared to stop Yi-zan's car, so he drove to the door of the hotel very smoothly. After the four got out of the car, Yi-zan threw the car keys to the waiter, and he quickly drove the car to the parking lot. After entering the hotel, Xiaolin and Conan were surprised by the resplendent hall. Mori continued to act forcefully. Although he was surprised by the grandeur of this hotel in his heart, on the surface, he looked very calm. After looking around, he looked calm and criticized Xiaolin and Conan. Both of you, pay attention. It's all rich people who come here. Pay attention to your image. The four of them were walking inside, and a man in a suit came over, with a beard on his face, but with a refined look. The man saw Maori. He immediately stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Mr. Maori, you are finally here." Maoli also went up to meet him, shook hands with the man, and said, "Attorney Xiang, I have long admired your name." Looking at Yizan and the others, Attorney Xiang said with some doubts, "Who are these?" A little embarrassed, he scratched his head. Maori smiled and said, "This is my daughter and a friend's child, this one is Yizan." After looking at Yizan a few more times, Attorney Xiang immediately showed a surprised expression and said, "You are Yizan, I have been looking up for a long time, but I have heard your name." Having said that, Attorney Xiang also stretched out his hand, wanting to shake hands with Yizan. "Have you heard my name?" Yizan was also slightly surprised. He was already so famous now. Although a little surprised, Yizan still stretched out his hand and shook hands with Attorney Xiang. After spending a long time in the officialdom, Attorney Xiang has a very strong ability to look at the eyes, so he quickly nodded and said, "The case that you helped Police Officer Mumu to solve is still circulating among us. Mr. Chang was once my guest." Being able to work in such a luxurious hotel, the circle of Lawyer Xiang's contact is naturally some rich people. It turns out that it is. Yizan smiled lightly, and did not respond to these reasons, but just nodded slightly. After all, Lawyer Xiang came to Maoli to discuss something important with him. After accusing Yizan and the others, he took Maoli to his room. The two wanted to discuss other matters. Yizan, Conan and Xiaolin waited outside temporarily. The three sat in the hotel restaurant, ordered some food here, and chatted leisurely. The people who came and went in the hotel were all young and beautiful ladies. Their presence naturally caused Yizan to take a few more glances. But in the eyes of other men, Xiaolin is also a young and invincible beautiful girl, a little more innocent than those beautifully dressed women. After a while, sitting at the table opposite Yizan and the others, there was a guy in a neat suit, who looked over here from time to time. Shish. In the end, the man seemed to ignore Yizan's existence, kept blinking at Xiaolin, and even whistled softly. Such a small action, of course, could not escape Yizan's eyes. He glanced behind him, stared and squinted slightly, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. Chapter 63-Rich and Powerful. Unexpectedly, when the man saw Yizan's eyes, not only was he not afraid at all, but he sneered proudly and slowly stood up from the chair. The man who got up had a sneer at the corner of his mouth, and walked over here, holding a glass of wine in his hand, making a very elegant movement. In front of Xiaolin, who came staggeringly, the man made a gesture of invitation and said with a smile, "Beautiful young lady, can I buy you a drink?" Xiaolin just looked back at the man and said with some contempt, "What kind of smell does it smell on you? It's really bad." The man couldn't help frowning slightly. He didn't expect Xiaolin to say such a thing, but he pretended to be calm and smiled. "I am a French famous brand perfume at this time. If you don't like it, I can change it." "Oh," with a light reply, Xiaolin said, "I'm already here with my friends, you can go now." This answer obviously made the man a little angry, but he still insisted on standing in front of Xiaolin, leaned forward, smiled and said, "I'm 670, the son of the president of New Clothing. As long as you follow me, make sure you have money can't be spent." "I'm sorry, I don't like it," Xiaolin said firmly, and already had some disgust for the man. Yizan, who was sitting next to him, was very satisfied with Xiaolin's answer. He glanced at the man and said to him, "Then you can leave. If you don't leave, I guarantee that you won't have a chance to leave later." The man was obviously arrogant on weekdays. Where did he hear Yizan's words? He suddenly became a little angry. he quickly walked to Yizan's side, and said very angrily, "You dare to talk to me like this, do you know who I am?" Before the man could finish his words, Yizan stood up directly, raised his right hand, and slapped him twice, and the guy immediately spun around in place. Although Yizan controlled the power, he inadvertently released some power that was stronger than ordinary people. The man was beaten round and round, and it took a while to stop, but his appearance had changed, like a big pig's head, which looked very ridiculous. "You, actually, dare to hit me?" When the man spoke, the wind was blowing in his mouth was unclear, and it took a long time to finish a sentence. Beating people here is an extremely bad thing. If others find out, the reputation of this hotel will be ruined. Soon, several people in charge at the door hurried over to Yizan and the others, and one of them, a tall man in a black suit, immediately said, "Sir, it's not good to do it in the hotel. Behavior, will you stop right now?" In fact, Yizan didn't hit this guy anymore, but he didn't bother to say anything to this guy like the bodyguard. He took out a golden card from behind, handed it to the bodyguard, and said indifferently, "Take this, go find it. You managers, then throw this guy out at me." Although he doubted Yizan's words, as a bodyguard, this tall man couldn't say anything, so he nodded and did as Yizan said. After a while, the bodyguard really came back, and he respectfully held the card to Yizan in his hand, and really followed what he said and drove the vexatious guy out of the hotel. After handing the golden card back to Yizan, the bodyguard said respectfully beside him, "Sir, if you need anything else, just tell us directly, all your consumption here is free." Yizan naturally knew the energy of this golden card, and after waving at the bodyguard, he said indifferently, "I have nothing to do with you here, go back." "Yes." The bodyguard nodded respectfully, and then withdrew from here, not daring to disturb Yizan and the others to eat compared to you. The guests around, as if they were watching a play, were discussing each other, "Who is Yizan, and he has such great energy." Conan sat next to him, his face even more gloomy and ugly. He didn't expect Yizan's strength and financial resources to be so terrifying. Compared with him, he seemed a little weaker. However, soon Conan's eyes filled with some flames of hope, and he secretly encouraged himself, "But my most powerful reasoning is not something he can match." Handing a cup of drink to Shaolin, Yizan smiled slightly, "Try this, it tastes very good." "Thank you." Shaolin also showed a cute smile, and expressed her gratitude to Yizan. She also felt a little different about Yizan in her heart. After all, he just stood up for himself. About an hour later, Maoli came out of the hotel. The two came to Yizan and the others together. Attorney Shang said with a smile, "I've kept you all waiting, why don't you have a meal here tonight? I am the host to invite you." When he saw this lawyer Shang this time, Yizan noticed something was wrong. This guy seemed to relax a lot now, as if he had accomplished a very important thing. Being able to have a free dinner, of course, Maori would not refuse, and immediately nodded with a smile. "Okay, just so I can take a look, what is there to eat here, haha." "Ah, no, someone's dead." Suddenly, from the direction of the elevator entrance, a waitress quickly ran towards the restaurant, holding a plate in both hands, very excited. "What?" The waitress's exclamation immediately attracted the attention of Yizan and the others. After hearing the scream, the manager and bodyguard of the hotel rushed over quickly and grabbed the waitress. The manager said solemnly, "What nonsense are you talking about? How could such a thing happen? Did you read it wrong? For a hotel, the occurrence of such a thing has a very bad influence, and the manager of course attaches great importance to it." It's a pity that the waitress seemed to be a newcomer and didn't follow the rules at all. She still said in a very frightened way, "It's true, manager, that woman lay dead at the elevator door." Chapter 64-Elevator Kill. Damn. Although the manager's face was not good looking, he hurriedly led someone over. As a detective, Maori naturally followed immediately, and Yizan and the others naturally followed along. Many people around wanted to follow, but the manager arranged for security and blocked the elevator passage. outside of the mouth. Not only that, even Yizan and the others were stopped by several security guards when they walked to the entrance of the elevator. "Sorry sir, there is a little accident here, please don't go there." A security guard with short hair in a suit and leather shoes reached out and stopped Maori. "I'm a famous detective, Kogoro Mori. If you don't let me in, can you solve this matter?" Mori said very rudely. In front of the security guard, he still had some confidence. Sure enough, when the security guard heard Kogoro Mori's name, his face changed a few times, and then he nodded respectfully and said, "Please wait here for a while, Mr. Mori, and I will inform the manager." After that, a few other security guards were left to guard here. The tall security guard wearing a suit hurriedly walked in the direction of the elevator. Seeing that the security guard was gone, Maui turned his head slightly proudly, and said to Conan and Shaolin, "I see, this is the influence of a famous detective. I dare to guarantee that in a minute, the manager will personally come out and meet us." "I hope so." Yizan smiled slightly, but said this lightly. In his hand, very nervous. After the manager appeared, he immediately looked around and quickly said, "Who are you, Lawyer Shang?" As soon as he heard this, Yizan couldn't help laughing out loud, and looked at Mori Kogoro with a very strange look, which made Mori Kogoro very embarrassed. "I feel that Mori Kogoro is cool and don't want it." Attorney Shang, who had just come out with Maori, was a little surprised to hear the manager calling his name at this time. He hurried forward a few steps, raised his hand, and went to the manager's face. "I am Attorney Shang, do you have anything to do with me?" The manager turned over a photo in his hand, shook it in front of Lawyer Shang, and said, "Look, is this your business card?" I saw the card in the manager's hand, and the information written on it was exactly the information on Lawyer Shang's business card. Seeing this business card, Attorney Shang's expression changed greatly, and he hurriedly said, "This is my business card, is there any problem?" The manager winked at the security guard beside him, and several security guards immediately made way out of the way. "Come with me, all of you, this matter is no trivial matter," the manager said worriedly. Soon, Yizan and the manager walked into a group of elevators maintained by security guards. As soon as they came in, they saw a woman in a black short skirt collapsed at the elevator entrance with a pale expression on her face. Pale white, 2 eyes rolled out, and there was a deep streak on the neck, which was already dead and could no longer die. "What, Chun Shenzi, why are you?" After seeing the female corpse in the elevator building, Attorney Shang's expression changed greatly. He stepped back several steps in a row, and almost fell to the ground. Obviously, the dead woman in front of him, the woman and Attorney Shang probably have a deep relationship, otherwise he wouldn't be so reactive. However, Yizan looked at the death scene and turned a big Byakugan in his heart. Why does this scene look more and more like the scene in the elevator murder case? Yizan took a few steps forward and looked down at the dead woman. Although this case looks very similar to the elevator murder case on the surface, it is fundamentally different. At this time, Conan looked at Yizan's actions. His heart was competitive, and he asked the lawyer Shang, whose expression changed greatly, "Do you know this woman? Who is he from you?" Attorney Shang, who looked very ugly, glanced here, covered his eyes with his hands, and said very sadly, "She is my wife, Chun Shenzi." What? At this moment, everyone present couldn't help but be shocked. Unexpectedly, the woman who died turned out to be Lawyer Shang's wife. After hearing this, Yizan could clearly sense that Attorney Shang was not very sad, but felt a little relieved. At this time, the manager next to him also took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, Officer Mumu." After the call was over, the manager said to everyone, "Please wait a moment, Police Officer Mumu will be here soon. Don't move the things here casually." Before the police officer Mumu came, Yizan looked around and found that the woman died very strangely. In terms of time, it should have been within this hour, but she was soaked all over, and she didn't know what was going on. Attorney Shang was even more sad, whimpering non-stop beside him, and seemed to be crying, but from time to time he looked towards Yizan and Conan, and seemed a little worried. After about a few minutes, a team of sirens sounded, and after a while at the door, a team of police officers walked in from the outside. A brown cloak and a two-legged beard officer Mew Mew walked at the front of the team. After a while, the arriving police surrounded the scene. Officer Mew Mew walked up to the manager and asked directly, "What happened?" The manager didn't dare to hide it, and told the police officer Can Mew Mew everything that happened. After all, everything that happened here has a major relationship with their hotel. After listening to the manager's words, Officer Mew Mew began to think. His eyes narrowed slightly, he glanced at the woman's body, and then put his eyes on Yizan. In this scene, Officer Mew Mew also there is an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Isn't this the method of the elevator murder case? Chapter 65-Investigation. Hey, Officer Mew Mew, are you in trouble? But don't forget that I am still here. Mori suddenly said, walking up and saying. Glancing at Maori, the police officer Mew Mew was helpless and could only pretend to be surprised. Oh, Mr. Maori is also here. I don't know what you think about this case. My view is very simple. This is a murder case, and the murderer is the manager. Maori pointed to the manager and said, it must have been the manager's product that was leaked by the deceased, and then the law could not punish the deceased's behavior, so the manager personally do it, and kill the dead. Clap. Yizan patted his forehead and was far away from Maori, looking like he didn't know this guy. Sure enough, not long after, everyone proved one thing to the manager, that is, the manager can't kill at all. Mori Kogoro was instantly stunned. Isn't these scenes exactly the scenes of the elevator murder case? Why the same scene? The result is completely different. On the other side, Officer Mew Mew wiped his sweat with a guilty conscience. He was very grateful to Mori Kogoro for coming forward. The woman's expression was not very excited. It seemed that she was not forcibly strangled to death, but was suddenly killed by a familiar person. With a slight movement of the corners of his eyes, Yizan asked the lawyer Shang, whose expression changed drastically, "Do you know this woman? Who is he from you?" Attorney Shang, who looked very ugly, glanced here, covered his eyes with his hands, and said very sadly, "She is my wife, Chun Shenzi." Officer Mew Mew thought about this, and quickly looked at Yizan, saying that it would be better for Yizan to come to this matter. Yizan, I don't know what your opinion is. Officer Mew Mew just said something. Conan jumped out. This time the modus operandi is very common, but one thing I can be sure of, the one who killed Chunshinko was someone who knew her well. Why do you say that? Officer Mew Mew looked at Conan and asked strangely. In fact, in Officer Mew Mew's heart, Officer Mew Mew prefers to ask Yizan compared to Conan, although after asking Yizan, he has a feeling the illusion of being crushed by IQ, but Yizan's case-solving efficiency is indeed very defying. Conan didn't know about these things. Conan glanced back and said to the manager, there should always be someone guarding the elevator entrance in your hotel. I don't know who is at the elevator entrance and found Chunshinzi's body. Which one is it? In such a big hotel, even a small elevator is always waiting, and it is impossible to leave easily. As soon as he heard this, the manager naturally thought of a person, the first waitress who found the body here. Little Lizzie, come here quickly. The manager beckoned to the young waiter behind him. Soon, the young waitress came out from behind and appeared in front of everyone. She seemed a little nervous, and it took a while to say, "Manager." The manager nodded and said to her, "Little Lizzie, tell me everything you saw." In front of Officer Mew Mew and Yizan, Xiao Lizzie didn't dare not tell the truth, and told the whole situation at the time. When I came down from the 13th floor, I just arrived here. As soon as I opened the elevator door, the woman's body fell directly from the door. I was so scared that my face turned pale. When Xiao Lizzie said this, her face was still not very good looking, as if recalling what happened not long ago, she still felt a little scary. Nodding slightly, Conan said, "So that's how it is. It seems that Chunshinko was killed long ago and placed at the elevator door." Taking a look behind him, Conan said to the lawyer Shang who had been behind him, "Tell me, what were you doing when your wife died?" Yizan looked at Conan pretending to be aggressive, but did not react. He took a step back and gave the scene to Conan, but a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Conan is not familiar with Yizan's character. Yizan is a person who likes to pretend very much, and the opportunity to pretend is taken away. This matter is a very serious matter for Yizan, and Yizan's action is not Yizan's concession. This only shows that Yizan is beginning to cheat people. When asked this question, Attorney Shang's expression was very ugly. After a while, he said, "I was with Mr. Mao Li at the time. If you don't believe it, you can ask Mr. Mao Li." Maori, who was beside him with a confused expression, glanced to the side, then nodded and said, "Yes, I was with Lawyer Shang just now. We chatted for a long time before we got down. I can testify, Chun Shenzi. He was by my side when I was killed." Mori Kogoro, whose IQ was crushed by Conan and Yizan in turn, was somewhat unhappy in his heart. When he spoke, his voice was low. Yizan, who was on the side, smiled even more, and with Maori testifying, Officer Miu Miu also nodded and said, "If you do this, Lawyer Shang's suspicion can be ruled out." "No, it's him," Conan said with certainty. After hearing Conan's words, Officer Mumu put his eyes on Yizan again. This behavior of Officer Miu Miu is obviously not confident in Conan's reasoning, and he wants to ask Yizan for the final confirmation. This made Conan even more annoyed. Looking at Mori Kogoro, he said, "Attorney Shang asked you to go to his room, and what kind of tasks did he arrange?" Hearing this question, Maori did not hesitate much, and 2.0 then continued, "He is looking for me, he wants me to check, his wife has signs of cheating, and she even stayed out for the night many times without coming back, so I want to be a private detective and find out his wife's secret." Such a thing will naturally make a lot of people face Yuhi, but after Mao Li said it, Attorney Shang didn't hesitate much, just nodded and said, "Yes, I asked Mr. Mao to do this." Many of the men present seemed to be able to feel Attorney Shang's mood. That kind of helplessness and sadness made them very uncomfortable. "I know who the murderer is." Conan emphasized it once again, then stretched out his hand and said with a sneer, "The real murderer of Chun Shenzi is you, Attorney Shang, I'm right." Chapter 66_Conan is wrong. Being pointed at by Conan, Attorney Shang's expression changed immediately, and he was still very nervous. Sweat seemed to flow down his forehead. But after a while, Attorney Shang seemed to remember that what he was facing in front of him was just a little boy, nothing compared to him at all, and if he wanted to question himself, he was just wondering. After being silent for a while, Attorney Shang suddenly burst into laughter and said with a sneer, "Officer Mumu, would it be too playful for you to listen to a child's opinion?" Officer Miu Mu's face was also a little ugly. After a while, he waved his hand and said, "The detection of the case is very difficult now. Of course, anyone's opinion can be heard." Officer Miu Miu said, and once again put his eyes on Yizan for help, very much hope that Yizan would come forward and quickly end this embarrassing situation. However, Yizan didn't seem to see the sight of the police officer Miu Miu. His smile seemed more gentle and warm, like the big brother next door. He smiled dotingly, "Just look at Conan's high opinion." Well, if Yizan's 30-year-old behavior is known to Yizan's confidant Yu Yan, he will definitely stay far away from Yizan at this time, because Yizan must be digging a hole at this time, and he is digging a super big hole. Who's going to be unlucky? Hearing Yizan's words, Conan was even more excited. He adjusted his glasses and said, "Although Mr. Shang has Uncle Maori to testify for you, you still have evidence of your alibi. What's more, your wife is still like that. To you, you have no feelings for her for a long time, and you want to find an opportunity to get rid of her. Everything in this hotel today is premeditated by you." Seemingly guessed what he was thinking. Attorney Shang's face was very ugly, but after a while, he regained his composure and said with a sneer, "You're just a little boy, and you can't produce any evidence. What can you say? What does it do? If you can't produce evidence, you can't get rid of a person's suspicion, and you can't arbitrarily determine whether a person has committed a crime." Conan said that Mr. Shang, if there is no evidence, many people may be implicated. Hearing this, Conan quickly entered the elevator and began to look for clues and evidence. Then he went to another elevator again, and quickly began to look for it. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes passed, and as time passed, everyone became impatient, and Officer Mumu came directly to Yizan. Yizan, please take action. At the words of the police officer Mumu, Conan quickly shouted, I found it, this is the murder weapon. Conan quickly came to the crowd with a piece of iron wire stained with blood and said. Officer Miu Miu heard the words and looked at Lawyer Shang with a happy expression. However, Attorney Shang's next reaction was to make Conan and Officer Mumu stunned. You don't think the blood on that is mine? Or my wife's? Conan and Officer Mumu were stunned, not knowing what to do. Since there are already bloodstains, it only needs to be identified, the truth will be clear, and Lawyer Shang's reaction only explains one point, that is, the bloodstains are not his. That, I accidentally scratched. At this time, a staff member raised his gauze-wrapped hand, indicating the origin of the blood. In an instant, Conan was embarrassed. He held up the wire in a daze, ashamed. Yizan. Well, Officer Miu Miu looked at Yizan again. Ah, Yizan yawned a lot and came to Conan with a smile on his face. He patted Conan's head and said, Little brother Conan, you're almost there. Yizan's behavior made Conan hate Kiba so much that Conan knew very well that this was definitely Yizan's intention. Yizan knew his identity, but he still regarded himself as a child. I'm not a child, Conan yelled at Yizan. Enin, got it. Yizan waved his hand casually, making Conan even more annoyed. Okay, Yizan, you should quickly solve this case. Police officer Miu Miu pleaded. When Conan heard this, his anger reached its peak, and he also looked at Yizan. I want to see how you solve the case. Conan's words made Yizan evoke a smile. Okay, little boy, let me show you the wisdom of adults. Just go home and eat milk obediently. What are you doing out for a walk? Quote. Yizan said, turned and left. Ah. Everyone stared blankly at Yizan's behavior, not knowing why. Officer Miu Miu said to Yizan, what is Yizan going to take? I'll have someone take it. Let's quickly investigate this case. Officer Miu Miu's words made Yizan turn to look at everyone. After a while, he spoke slowly. However, Yizan's opening made everyone stupid. It seems that you group of people are in arrears with their IQs and need to recharge. I haven't seen the 440 for a long time. This is not the scene of the crime at all, and the obvious case of corpse removal can't be seen. It's really a pair of white eyes. Come on, keep up, the crime scene isn't here. Huh. Everyone was really stunned at this time. He and others have been joking around here for so long, and after a long time, the crime scene is not here at all. This is really a beeping dog. In an instant, everyone turned their anger on Conan, and they all blamed the child for taking himself and others into a ditch because he insisted on solving the case. Well, that's it, it's definitely not that he and others are in arrears with their IQ. Everyone thinks so at this moment. But when everyone followed Yizan, Attorney Shang's expression changed and he looked around nervously. Huh, let's go, Attorney Shang. Are you afraid? Yizan's mouth evoked a faint smile, which made Attorney Shang helplessly refute and followed. No way, the case has been solved halfway now. Even if Lawyer Shang has thousands of people who don't want to, it's not his decision. After all, so many police officers are here now. If he doesn't cooperate, he doesn't know where to go. Run away. Chapter 67_ This is the truth. Soon, all the people in Yizan walked to the bathroom. Since the bathroom was not very big, some people were standing outside. Only a few important people involved were qualified to go inside. In the bathroom, Yizan didn't hesitate, and pointed out the loophole of Lawyer Shang. He came to the window of the bathroom, looked around carefully, turned around and said to everyone, the murderer is Lawyer Shang, he's got a really good plan. In this bathroom, Attorney Shang's face became even more ugly, and beads of sweat had already rolled down from his forehead. But Yizan hadn't had any conclusive evidence yet, so he was very reluctant to let Lawyer Shang just do it, and he couldn't help but snorted. It would be too decisive to identify me as the murderer after a visit to the bathroom. Well, is there any evidence? Until the last moment, the murderer usually won't admit it so easily. That's what Attorney Shang thinks now. Yizan didn't worry about this problem either. He walked to the window and stretched out his hand indifferently. In front of the window, he took out a piece of black cloth, which happened to be scratched on the edge of the window. It was only half the size of a slap. Will not attract the attention of ordinary people. But at this time, this small piece of cloth became the most crucial piece of evidence. Yizan, who was careful, just found this clue. Holding this small piece of cloth in his hand, Yizan said to Lawyer Shang, "If I guessed correctly, there is a spot on your body, it should be broken, and the shape and size should be just right, you need to verify it." Seeing the things in Yizan's hands, Attorney Shang quickly took a few steps back, his face turned pale, and finally he insisted, "I accidentally caught it." Seeing this, Yizan shook his head slightly. "Don't be stubborn, this is the room next to the bathroom, but at the crime scene, there are things like your wife's hair here, just need." Yizan was just halfway through, but Lawyer Shang wanted to escape quickly. Now that the matter has reached this stage, how could the police officer Miu Miu let Lawyer Shang escape like this, and immediately said to a few people beside him, "What are you still doing, grab him." Yes, several young police officers rushed up and arrested Lawyer Shang. At this time, everyone also clearly found that there was a small gap in the corner of his back. Although the position of the gap is very small, it caught everyone's attention. Yizan took this corner of the shirt and compared it on Attorney Shang's clothes, and found that the size was exactly the same, it was simply perfect. At this moment, Yizan's face became icy cold in an instant. As a person who loves fragrance and jade, Yizan is very disdainful of this kind of person who killed his wife, and snorted coldly, "It has come to this point, what else is there to say?" At this point, Attorney Shang didn't know how to refute. He just stared at the ceiling blankly, as if he didn't know what to say. Seeing that Attorney Shang stopped talking, Yizan put the things in his hand aside and said solemnly, "Since you refuse to speak, let me speak for you. You took advantage of the time when you were separated from Maori, climbed out of the bathroom window, went to the next room, killed your wife, and then moved the body to the elevator entrance, making an illusion that she was robbed of money and died, then, rushed back to Maori, using the excuse to go to the toilet, right?" Quote. Yizan took a breath and told the whole story of the case. After he finished speaking, he stared at Lawyer Shang and said solemnly, "I don't know if what I said is correct or not." Attorney Shang, who was already gray-faced, couldn't help but sneer after hearing Yizan's inference, and even applauded. Then he said, "It's really admirable, what you said is absolutely correct, there is not a single word deviation, it is true that I did everything, and my wife was also killed by me." "How do you know the crime scene is here?" Conan asked Yizan in disbelief. Yizan looked at Conan and raised his mouth, "Want to know?" Conan nodded quickly, and Yizan smiled even more, "Guess." Ignoring Conan's frantic appearance, Yizan looked at the arrested Lawyer Shang and asked with a serious expression, "I don't know why you want to kill your wife." When asked this question, Attorney Shang's expression changed slightly, and then he said, "The reason is very simple, I am a barrister and have dealt with many big companies, they will ask me to be their consultant, of course in this way, I learned a lot of secrets, and at the same time, my wife learned about it. She threatened me with this, asking me for 100 million yuan and then signing a divorce agreement. If she didn't give it, she would spread the word about what I know." Speaking of this, Attorney Shang smiled bitterly before continuing, 100 million yuan is not a lot for me, but what I hate even more is that she even threatened me with something like that and asked me to sign it. Divorce agreement, so I put forward a condition, asking her to come to the hotel to wait for me. I will give her the money, and you will know what happens after that. Quote. After hearing what Attorney Shang said, everyone was silent for a while. I didn't expect that behind this case, there was such a hidden secret. It seems that everything is not just superficial. But Lawyer Xiang is now more of a murderer, and he can't escape no matter what. Yizan looked at Lawyer Xiang, who was taken away, and shook his head slightly, feeling very emotional about this incident. Fortunately, my women are reasonable. At this moment, Yizan was even more grateful for his many Yuhian characters. The case has come to light, and the police officer Miu Miu also quickly ordered other police officers to take the criminal Lawyer Xiang away. Once again, it was because of Yizan's help that the case was solved. Officer Miu Miu was also very grateful to Yizan, smiled slightly, walked over quickly, and said with a smile, "Yizan is really amazing, the case is in your hands, it becomes a snap. Otherwise we have to think for ourselves, and we still don't know what year and month it will be." Quote. "Don't be too polite, I just reasoned for you," Yizan said lightly. Chapter 68-Strange Corpse Thief. Maori put his hands on the back of his neck and couldn't help but say, "If Yizan has always been so good, I'm afraid I'll be laid off soon after Maori." Yizan smiled slightly. "If you happen to be laid off, you can come to my house and help me be a housekeeper, isn't it better?" As soon as he heard this, Maori seemed to be interested, grinned and said, "What are you saying is true? If it is true, then how much are you going to give me a month?" Maori would not be polite to requests for money. He now knows very well that Yizan is a very rich local tyrant, and he is still the very rich type. "Haha, Mr. Maori, how much do you want? Yizan will never give it." Yizan laughed. "I want." Maori really rubbed his hands, ready to tell the answer he thought, and then suddenly reacted, looking at Yizan in surprise. No, won't give it." Quote. "Ha ha ha, don't worry, when the time comes, you can ask Shaolin as much as you want." Yizan's words surprised Maori Kogoro for a moment, and then he suddenly reacted and looked at Shaolin. Shaolin, on the other hand, looked at 737 Yizan angrily. "What did you say?" "No, nothing." Yizan quickly waved his hand. However, at this moment, a young policeman rushed in from the outside in a hurry, and said to the police officer Mumu, "Officer, something is bad, the woman's body has been stolen." What? This news undoubtedly shocked everyone again. How could such a thing happen? As a police officer, it is a very shameful thing to let the court testimony disappear under my nose. Officer Miu Miu suddenly became a little angry, and said quickly, "Then what are you still standing here for? Don't hurry and find it for me." After speaking, Officer Mumu turned around again and said to Yizan with some pleading, "Yizan, I want to ask you a favor for something, can you help me find the missing body?" Yizan nodded and said, "According to my guess, this corpse was placed at the elevator entrance. 2 policemen were guarding there just now. It is impossible for it to disappear so soon." Seemingly thinking of something, Yizan said to the policeman who came up to report the letter, "Tell me why you can't even see a dead person." When asked this question, the policeman felt a little embarrassed, and after a while, he hesitated and said, "We were guarding the body below. Who knows that the manager of the hotel saw that we were working hard, so he sent someone over to deliver 2 cups. We didn't think much about the drink at the time, we just drank it, and within a minute, we fainted, and when we woke up, the female corpse was gone." After listening to the narration, Officer Mumu said directly, "Quick, do all you can to search for the manager of this hotel, he definitely didn't run out." Officer Mumu gave the order directly. Yizan thought for a while, then walked up to Officer Mumu and said to him, "Well, since I'm involved in this case, then of course I can't just give it up halfway. I'll go find the manager together." Of course, Police Officer Miu Miu couldn't ask for help, so how could he refuse Yizan's request? He immediately smiled and said, "That's really great, with Yizan's help, I'll be able to find that guy soon." "No problem." Yizan smiled lightly, and immediately set off with Maori. The most doubtful thing in his heart now is why the manager wanted to steal a female corpse. Such behavior is too pervert. When they came to the scene where the woman's body was stolen, many of the waiters present looked at Officer Mumu and Yizan with bewildered expressions, as if they didn't know what happened just now. After some inquiries, Yizan and the others found out that the manager of the hotel had given everyone a drink, so that everyone was overwhelmed, and this gave him the opportunity to steal the female corpse. So that's how it is. Yizan's brows were slightly wrinkled. He didn't expect things to develop to this point, and he seemed to have to think of a way. Walking to the place where the female corpse was originally parked, Yizan lowered his head slightly, looked around carefully, and checked for a little bit of clues. What's that? On the ground, there was a little thing that caught Yizan's attention. Yizan walked forward, reached out and touched the ground, and immediately found out that it was a little bit of shampoo. Reaching out and dipping it on it, Yizan picked it up and smelled it, and immediately guessed which brand of shampoo it was. Combining it a little more, Yizan immediately thought that when Chun Shenzi was found, her hair was still wet, and because of this, she washed her hair before she died. Lawyer Bear was killed. It was really sad that the manager of this hotel had stolen the body before she died. Even her husband, Lawyer Shang, was shocked. In addition, Yizan also found a little bit of cigarette butts on the ground. He picked it up and saw that there was an English sign written on it. After seeing this, Yizan took another look at the leaving footprints, and suddenly had an inaccurate idea in his heart. Go and have a look. Yizan's eyes narrowed slightly, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. Said to the waiter behind him, you tell me, there are several rooms in this hotel who use this brand of shampoo and those who provide these cigarettes. A waitress who seemed to be a supervisor walked up to Yizan, picked up the things and looked at them, then nodded and said, we have at least 1/3 of the rooms here, and these two things are used for the sake of to provide convenience for customers. Of course, some customers do not like these two brands, we will also change to other brands. Quote. 1/3 of the rooms, that's hundreds. Yizan's brows immediately wrinkled. After all, this is a 5-star hotel with hundreds of rooms. But then, Yizan looked in the direction where the footsteps left, and found that it was in the west direction. He couldn't help but make a decision, and the scope of the search was immediately narrowed. Chapter 69:Evil grows into courage. Yizan said, Officer Mumu, according to my speculation, the guy who stole the body should be in the rooms in front of you. You should bring people to search for it. Any room that uses such cigarettes and shampoo should be carefully searched again. Yizan, who has an amazing memory, just remembered that this kind of cigarette was just smoked by the manager. He has left these evidences now, which is also the way to find him. Even if there are dozens of rooms in the West, it is not enough to rely on the police force brought by the police officer Mumu. Yizan turned to the Maori people behind him and said, let's help too. Okay. Shaolin nodded and quickly followed Yizan's footsteps. Although Maori and Conan were a little upset, they also followed. The group of 4 walked to the rooms in the west, and after asking the attendants to get the keys, they came to a room, opened it directly, and searched inside for a while. After searching for several rooms in a row, Yizan and the others found nothing. Gradually, everyone became suspicious. Conan even said next to him, Brother Yizan, will you find anyone? Although it was just an ordinary question, Conan's tone was obviously dissatisfaction with Yizan, and even had some other meanings in it. However, Yizan can also understand that, as the protagonist in the original novel, he is being suppressed by himself everywhere. Of course I can find it. Yizan smiled faintly, but he was thinking about it. He simply found an opportunity to send Conan back to his parents, so as not to get in the way. At the door of a room named 909, Shaolan took out the hotel key and said to Yizan, would you like to go in this room and take a look? Several rooms have been found, and everyone is somewhat disappointed, and it seems that they do not hold much hope. Look, of course, but Yizan's principle is that as long as something is determined, it must be done well, and there will definitely be unexpected results. Sure enough, when the door was opened, Yizan smelled an unusual smell. His face changed suddenly, and he lowered his voice. There is no one in here, but there is a strong smell of smoke. There must be weird. Moreover, when Yizan looked over to the wardrobe, he happened to find that a black suit was exposed from the side of the wardrobe. After discovering this, Yizan's complexion changed immediately, and he quickly called to Shaolin, who walked over to the wardrobe. "Come here quickly." However, it was too late. When Yizan just shouted this sentence, the door of the wardrobe was pushed open, and the manager in a black suit rushed out. The manager who came out of the closet still held a shiny fruit knife in his hand, and wrapped his arms around Shaolin's neck with one hand, and the hand holding the knife was placed on Shaolin's face. "Don't act rashly, or I'll kill her with one knife," the manager said fiercely. As soon as he saw his daughter being held hostage, Maori panicked, and hurriedly pleaded and shouted, "No, don't touch my daughter, I only have this one daughter." But the manager, who is wicked and timid, how can he manage so much? The fruit knife in his hand is getting more and more forward, and he shouts, "Get out of the way, I want to leave from here." Maybe it was because there was a lot of movement here, and the vicious manager had not had time to leave here, and the police officer Mew Mew, who led the team from a distance, had already arrived at the door of this room. In an instant, the original room was not very large, and it was immediately surrounded by water, and a lot of police were deployed outside the door. At this moment, the door of the wardrobe moved, and a corpse slipped out of it. It was Chun Chenzi's. She had already died. Lying in the wardrobe was also extremely terrifying, giving people a gloomy feeling. A feeling of. However, compared to this, Yizan's face was even more gloomy and terrifying, and the huge and oppressive aura was almost breathless. A trace of killing intent couldn't help but bloom. Yizan has always paid great attention to the protection of her own woman. This time, Shaolan was the first time in Yizan's long history that her own woman had been kidnapped. Although Shaolan is not her own woman yet, it is not much worse. Yizan has always regarded her as his own woman. And now, his own woman has been kidnapped by an ordinary person. "Ha ha, you are really impatient." Yizan's voice sounded like it came from the 9 Serenity Hell. There is no doubt about how powerful Yizan is. The terrifying aura vibrated, and even made the whole room unbearable, exuding a distorted creaking sound. This time, Yizan is really out of anger. He has been in the world of Conan, which has almost no extraordinary abilities. Yizan is too relaxed, and this is what happened now. "What do you want to do?" The manager looked at Yizan in horror and asked. But Yizan didn't say anything, just walked forward and came to the manager's side. "Don't come here or I'll kill her," the manager yelled. "Then do it." Yizan's cold voice made the manager almost crazy and wanted to wave his arms. However, "Why can't I move?" The manager was horrified by the fact that he had no ability to move. Yizan grabbed the manager's hands. Crack! There was a strange sound of broken bones, and everyone was shocked to see that the manager's arms were strangely bent, and the bones inside were broken. "Ah!" the manager cried out in pain, while Yizan hugged Shaolan. At the same time, a flower from the other side appeared on the manager's body. "Yizan, I'm so scared." Shaolan buried her head in Yizan's arms. Yizan, on the other hand, glanced at the other side flower on the manager's body and felt ruthless in his heart. This other side flower would make the manager realize what a hellish life is in the future. Yizan knows that although the manager's current behavior is already a crime, it is still a long way from the death penalty, and Yizan absolutely does not want this person to survive in this world, and Yizan is not prepared to make this manager very comfortable. Death, but let the manager realize what horror is. Chapter 70_solve. "Tell me, why did you steal the corpse?" Yizan asked coldly, looking at the experience of screaming on the ground. "Manager, you struggled a few times, trying to get up from the ground, but the arms of this paragraph made it all in vain. You can only threaten in a deep voice. Let me go, otherwise, I will be welcome." At this moment, the police officer Mumu and others who rushed in from the outside also tracked down here. As soon as everyone came in, they surrounded the manager. Seeing Yizan arresting the person, Officer Mew Mew quickly said, "Yizan, thank you very much this time for helping us arrest the suspect." Saying that, Officer Mew Mew winked at the 2 police officers behind him, and 2 of them ran out immediately, took out the handcuffs, and handcuffed the manager. After capturing the person, Officer Mumu snorted coldly, "Bring everyone back to me." "Wait." Yizan stretched out his hand and said, "Let him explain why he stole that Chun Shenzi's body." Although Yizan asked, in fact, Yizan's real purpose was to make the manager's fate more distorted. "You should experience despair when you are absolutely rational," Yizan thought angrily. "Yes, let's talk. Why did you steal the body?" Police Officer Mumu asked coldly after the manager had been completely subdued. "That the matter is over, the manager can no longer escape. Under such circumstances, he has no choice but to say, 'I am Chun Shenzi's lover, she died in our hotel this time, I am very sad, so want to take her out of here.'" Hearing these words, everyone's expressions were full of surprise. They never thought that this manager would be so pervert and would do such a thing. But Yizan has a very keen perception, and immediately noticed that things are not that simple. His face turned cold, and he lowered his voice. "Do you think you can deceive me about this matter? Tell me honestly, and maybe there is forgiveness. Your chance." Looking at Yizan's eyes, the manager felt nervous for a while. He had never been so careful in front of a person. Yizan was the first. After being silent for a while, the manager also knew that he could no longer hide the facts, so he showed a wry smile and said, "Okay, I will tell the truth. In fact, I will do this. It is the chairman of the hotel who called me. If I want to protect the reputation of the hotel, such a thing cannot be spread out, so I will think of this method." Quote. When it came to this, the manager quickly said, "As you all know, for a hotel, reputation is very important. If something like this happens, it will have a great impact, so no matter what, we will keep it a secret." Seeing the nervous expression on the manager's face, Yizan knew that if he said that, it was already inseparable. It seemed that this was their real purpose. At this time, the police officer Miu Miu walked forward, moved the two beards on his lips, and said, "Even so, you have already constituted a crime. I'm sorry, you are going to be arrested." After speaking, Officer Mumu waved to the two policemen behind him and said, "Take him back. The matter has come to this point, it can be regarded as an end. I did not expect that a murder case will occur in this place." At the entrance of this hotel, Maoli and Yizan walked in front, watching the sunset. Maoli couldn't help but sigh. "I thought there would be a good night today, but I didn't expect another such case to happen." Seeing Maori's appearance, he still prefers peace. Yizan couldn't help but smile and said, "It seems that you are still worried about the country and the people. You are not suitable for being a detective." "Ha ha." Maori smiled and said with a smile, "My detective level is indeed not as good as Yizan." Soon, the four of them got into Yizan's car and drove all the way. Yizan first sent the three of them back to the detective agency, and then drove back by himself. After returning to the villa, Yizan quickly summoned an organized killer. In the quiet secret room, Yizan sat in front of the stone table, holding a cup of hot tea in his hand, and tapped lightly on the stone table with the other hand. His eyes narrowed slightly, he didn't know what he was thinking about. Such Yizan looks a bit cold, especially his eyes, which give people an extremely deep feeling, full of wisdom and perception. After a while, the door of the secret room was pushed open, and a young man walked in from the outside. The man was dressed in black, with short hair and a solemn face. Stern look. After the man appeared again, he immediately knelt down in front of Yizan. "Master, subordinate number 009. Quote. Yizan just glanced at the man lightly, and said, "Very good, you are 009. I heard that you have completed a lot of tasks outside. Now I have one thing that I want to give you to do. It's my honor to be able to do things for the master, even if I go through fire and water, I don't hesitate." 009 seemed very excited, and quickly showed his loyalty. A long time ago, Yi Xuan established his own consortium and killer organization on the 18th. Now, this organization has become very large, and the 10 people who initially received income have also become the key figures in charge of this organization. The person who appeared in front of Yizan now was one of these 10 people, whose name was 009. Of course, ordinary people also did not have the qualification 2.2 to see Yizan. Nodding slightly, Yizan said, "Very good, I hope you can handle this matter well, and the reward for you will be indispensable." Squinting slightly, Yizan continued, "Go and take Conan away and send him to a place no one knows about. I don't want him to appear in front of my eyes again." In the previous time, Yizan kept Conan by his side in order to understand the fate of his life, thinking that he could control Conan, but today, the manager's behavior let Yizan know that he would also make mistakes, and compared to the manager, Conan, the threat of this son of destiny is even greater, so Yizan is going to keep Conan away from himself. After all, Conan's son of destiny is extremely troublesome. It is not advisable to kill the son of destiny rashly. It is better to send him away first and see. Chapter 71 _ Make Conan disappear. Yes, Master. 009 nodded quickly, then got up slowly and withdrew from the secret room. After 009 left, he quickly drove to Maori's house. He accelerated all the way, and soon arrived at the bottom of Maori Detective Agency. Looking through the bottom, 009 saw that all the lights had dimmed, and now in the middle of the night, most people have already rested. Taking out a photo, 009 glanced at it a little and was able to determine his goal. The character above is exactly the Conan Yizan wanted him to solve. 009, who came to the back of the detective agency, quickly climbed up the surrounding walls. After a few tosses, he came to the roof, landed next to the windowsill, quietly opened the windowsill, and walked into the house. He fell quietly, and then hurriedly walked to the bedside in the room. Now in the dead of night, only a shadow can be seen, dangling in the moonlight. Needless to say, even in deep sleep, Conan was very vigilant. He suddenly noticed that someone appeared behind him, and quickly opened his eyes, ready to scream. But 009 passed special training. Before Conan could scream, he pulled out a needle from behind and stuck it on Conan's body. No matter how smart Conan was, after receiving this needle, it felt like the world was spinning, and the whole person was dizzy. As soon as his eyelids were pulled, he fainted. Looking at the fainted Conan, 009 also showed a strange smile on his face. He could guarantee that when the sun rose the next day, he would never see this person named Conan again in this place. Then, 009 picked up Conan and jumped from the window with him. Before leaving, he did not forget to leave a note on the table. ... After coming out of this secret room, Yizan returned to his room, and after chatting with number 18 for a while, he fell asleep. The next day, when Yizan had just finished breakfast, Yizan's cell phone rang. He received a call saying that there was a TV station and wanted to invite 2 detectives to participate in their show. Yizan is very popular recently. Was about to ask Yizan if he had this idea. Yizan didn't have much thought about this kind of thing. After a few vague words, he hung up the phone. Picking up the newspaper on the table, Yizan looked at it leisurely. According to his estimation, 009 should have finished the matter, and at this time, Maori should also call. Ding ding. Sure enough, only 10 minutes later, Maori's phone hurriedly called. Hey, is it Yizan? The big thing is bad, Conan was taken away, and now he's gone, trouble. Come over quickly and help me find it. Although he knew what was going on for a long time, Yizan still pretended to be surprised and said, Conan is gone, then wait a moment, I'll be right over. After hanging up the phone, Yizan drove the car and went directly to Maori's detective office. Yizan was still very satisfied with the killer he had trained, and his ability to do things was also very good. After arriving at Maori's detective office, Yizan hurriedly knocked on the door and walked in, and came out to greet his Maori Kogoro. When he saw Yizan coming, he rushed over as if he saw a savior. What should I do? Conan is gone. Mori said nervously. To be honest, Mori's main concern is that Conan's disappearance will cause him serious trouble. If others say that he lost Conan, then he, as a detective, is at the end of his life. Yizan comforted Maori for a while, then said, Don't worry, let's go to Conan's room first. Maori nodded quickly and walked to Conan's room with Yizan. As soon as the door was opened, Xiaolan was rummaging inside. Seeing Yizan, Xiaolan also said nervously, Yizan, I found this, come and see. What? The corner of Yizan's eyes moved slightly, and he walked over quickly, only to see a note in Xiaolan's hand. It reads, Uncle Maori, Sister Xiaolan, thank you for taking care of you. I've been bothering you for too long. I'm going home now, don't miss me too much, Conan. After seeing this note, Mori breathed a sigh of relief, patted his chest and said, it scared me a lot. I thought Conan was missing. It turned out to be going home. That's great, come on. This kid is gone, and I've saved a lot of rice. On the other hand, Xiaolan, who seemed to be the son of destiny, sensed something was wrong, read the note in her hand several times, then frowned and said, Dad, how can you just judge by a note? Conan is all right, maybe it was left by criminals, and maybe Conan has been caught by them far away now. Quote. This. Maoli didn't know what to say, he didn't even think about these 107 kinds of questions. Yizan, who was on the side, couldn't help but admire in his heart. Maoli was like an idiot, and Xiaolan was much smarter than him. Just this, how did Maoli become a detective? Of course, the main messenger behind this whole thing is Yizan. Since he wants to make Conan disappear, and there is no doubt about it, he is naturally well prepared. With a slightly raised corner of his mouth, Yizan said to Xiaolan, by the way, does Conan have any relatives here? You can call them and ask them, and you will know the result. Yeah, how could I forget Dr. Ali? Xiaolan suddenly patted her head, forgetting such an important thing. Picking up the phone quickly, Xiaolan called Dr. Ali. Once connected, Xiaolan quickly asked, Dr. Li, where did Conan go, do you know? Soon, Dr. Li's slightly old voice rang on the other side of the phone, and he replied, it's Xiaolan, I forgot to tell you, Conan's parents came back last night, and they are going to take Conan to America. And I was in a hurry, so I left early in the morning and didn't bother you. I'm really sorry. Chapter 72 _ Invitation to TV Show. After hearing Dr. Ali's answer, Xiaolan finally suppressed her worries. After all, Conan went home with his parents, and there was nothing to say. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiaolan replied and planned to hang up the phone. But Dr. Li seemed to have remembered something, and quickly took advantage of Xiaolan to hang up the phone and said, by the way, Xiaolan, I have something to tell you. Conan's parents, in order to thank you for your care during this time, will make a payment to your dad's account and thank you for taking care of him during this time. Maori, who was next to him, had been eavesdropping on the conversation between Xiaolan and Dr. Ali, and when he heard a call for money, he immediately became elated. Raising his hands high, Maori said excitedly, it's great, the rice for so long has not been in vain, good. After the phone call with Dr. Ali, Yizan smiled and said to the two of them, well, Conan is home safely now, you finally have nothing to worry about. Maori said with a smile, of course not to worry, this kid is gone, I can finally be quiet and peaceful. Maolilan also showed a slight smile and said to Yizan next to him, Conan is not here today, let's go out to eat. Yizan also nodded. For Xiaolan's appointment, Yizan has never had a reason to refuse. At this time, in Dr. Ali's house, a handful of old Dr. Ali was looking at the woman in front of him in a daze, with a blank expression on his face. What happened just now? Dr. Ali was stunned, scratched his head, looked around, and said slowly, by the way, in order to make your science and technology better, I decided to go to the United States. After all, is the place where the talent is abundant, why is it still delaying here? As Dr. Li said, he quickly began to pack up his things, but he didn't even notice the abnormality of a charming woman standing beside him. This woman is none other than the 18th. And Dr. Li's reaction can be done with a very simple demonic illusion. On the 18th, watching Dr. Ali's actions, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. As expected of my husband's ability, it is really useful. All of this is just a deliberate arrangement by Yizan. With his power, it is definitely not a difficult thing to let someone leave silently and not be discovered by anyone. Having accepted the fact that Conan had left, Shaolin and Yizan still had Maori and came to a restaurant downstairs for dinner. When they entered here, a cool wind blew over. Yizan found a good spot and took the two to sit there. Maori's mood can be said to be the best among several people. Now he is waiting for the sum of money to arrive. In this case, he can also spend a lot of time. Soon, the waiter came up to ask them to order. After a few people ordered something, they sat there and watched TV. The TV broadcast was a variety show called Detective Agency. The ratings were not bad, and it was considered to be one of Maori's favorite shows. Seeing this show being broadcast, Maori said involuntarily, "If only I could be invited to this show at some point." Shaolan smiled slightly and said to Maori, "As long as your father is willing to work hard and become a great detective, someone will definitely come to invite you." "Hey, that's true. With my intelligence and ingenuity, it will be discovered one day sooner or later." Maori still smiled conceitedly, and when he touched his hair, he appeared to be more witty. After the dishes were ready, Mori had just moved his chopsticks, and the mobile phone he was carrying at any time rang. As soon as he picked it up, the other party said, "Is that Mr. Mori? We are the organizer of the detective agency program. We want to invite. Do you have time for our next show?" What? Just when he put a piece of yuhi roast pork in his mouth, Maori was so excited that he almost jumped up from the chair. "Hey, do you have time?" Seeing that Maoli didn't answer for a long time, the other party couldn't help but ask one more question. With such a good opportunity, of course Maori would not refuse, and quickly nodded. "Okay, I have time, I will definitely be there in the next episode." After hanging up the phone, Maori couldn't hide his excitement, and said quickly, "Look, I said, I'm a genius of reasoning, and the detective agency is going to invite me in the next show." Looking at the excited Maori, Shaolin couldn't help but smiled beside her, and expressed her blessings to her father. But Yizan, who was on the side, couldn't help but twitched at the corners of his mouth. It seemed like he had called him this morning, but he just rejected it. Looking at it like this show came to look for gross profit because it couldn't find anyone. Of course, even if the truth is like this, Yizan has no idea to dismantle him. After all, Maoli was so happy after all, so there was nothing wrong with letting him have a good time. The meal was very enjoyable. At the end of the meal, Maori was still rushing to pay the bill. It seemed that the detective show invited him, which made him very happy. A few days passed in a flash, and when the detective agency program finally started recording, Maori and Shaolin were ready early in the morning, ready to go to the program group. Before leaving, he did not forget to call Yizan and ask him if he had time to watch the recording together. Since Shaolan was also going to record that show, Yizan certainly wouldn't refuse the invitation, so he naturally agreed and went to the TV station together. Accompanied by Yizan, the three of them drove the car and quickly rushed to the location of the TV station. In the past few days, there has been no news from Conan, as if he really went to the United States and lived a happy life there. However, in fact, what the result was, it was not anyone like Mori Kogoro and Morilin who could know Akatsuki. Chapter 73_Producer. Of course, things will be arranged so well. All of this is because of Yizan. With his huge organization behind everything, there is no chance for Conan to resist. After coming to the TV station, a young female host walked over with a middle-aged man. As soon as the middle-aged man came over, he quickly stretched out his hand and smiled at Maori. "You are Mr. Maori, right? I'm the host of this show, Matsuo." It turned out to be Mr. Matsuo. "I have been looking forward to it for a long time. I often see you on TV." Mori said excitedly. After all, he is a fan of this show. Matsuo, who was talking to Maori, glanced at Yizan inadvertently, and immediately became excited, and quickly said, "This must be Yizan. I didn't expect you to come, it's really our honor." Having said that, Matsuo walked over quickly, and chatted with Yi Xuanpan, and also talked about the fact that they wanted to invite Yi Zan as a guest, which made Maori on the side very uncomfortable. Of course, Yi Zan didn't have many ideas about what kind of guest he was. What he wanted to do now was to solve a few more cases and exercise his mental strength. Soon, the recording of the show was about to start, and a man about the same age as Matsuo walked over from the other channel. The man was a little fat, holding a plan in his hand, and said to Matsuo, "Hey, Matsuo, the show is about to start, so hurry up and prepare. This is your last show recording, so cherish it. Oh, the last time." Hearing this, Matsuo's expression suddenly became a lot ugly, but he couldn't refute anything. After all, the other party was his boss, so he had to bite Kiba and said, "Yes, Mr. Tosuke, I will prepare immediately." The excited Dongsuk nodded and said to himself, "The next show is going to be hosted by a female star who is Yuhi, and the ratings will definitely be doubled by then, hee. After speaking, Dongsuk was about to leave here. Before he left, he seemed to have discovered the existence of Maori and Yi Zan, and turned around and said, "You are the guests this time, cherish the opportunity, maybe it is you. When it's time to make a name for itself." After finishing speaking, Dongsuk took the thing in his hand and left here with a smile on his face, as if thinking that the next show will be much more popular than now. Looking at Dongsuke's back, a chill flashed in Matsuo's eyes, but it soon disappeared. But even so, this little action of his still failed to escape Jack's observation. He saw at a glance that there was murderous intent on Matsuo's face. After a while, Matsuo came over and smiled at Mori. "Mr. Mori, let's go down and prepare." Well, okay. Although he didn't know what happened, Maori agreed and went down to prepare first. After all, he only came to participate in this show, not to care about their internal conflicts. The other hand, Yi Zan couldn't help but ask the hostess, "What's going on?" There seems to be some contradiction between them. The hostess seemed to know something about the whole thing, and she couldn't help but sighed and said, "It all started from a few months ago. At that time, Mr. Tosuke, who was a producer, we ended our show and replaced it with a female star to host it, but Mr. Matsuo always disagreed, so it was only a few days ago that this matter was settled. This is the last time we will host this show, alas." "So it is." Yi Zan nodded, but didn't say much. He could only say that this kind of thing is very common in the company. On the other hand, Shaolin still seemed a little angry next to her, and said indignantly, "Mr. Tosuke is too much, how can he replace others like this?" The hostess originally wanted to say something, but the time for the show to start was almost here, and the makeup person behind her was already calling her, so she had to hurry up. The show was about to start. Yi Zan pulled Shaolin's clothes and said, "Let's go to the auditorium too." "Yeah," Shaolin nodded, followed behind Yi Zan, and the two walked towards the auditorium together. The recording of the show started quickly, with Matsuo and the hostess taking the stage, with Maori sitting next to the two of them. Matsuo said at the beginning, "Everyone knows that Mr. Mori is a well-known detective in Akatsuki. We are very lucky to have Mr. Mori this time." Maori also reached out to greet the audience and said with a smile, "Thank you, everyone. Thank you." Soon, Matsuo moved the whole host forward step by step, and started one by one according to the links prepared in advance. When it was almost over, there was a quiz session with prizes. The program team played a short video, and then the people on the scene guessed who was the murderer. Matsuo stood up from the chair and said with a smile, "The following video, I hope everyone can come out, who is the real murderer." The video was played quickly. About 4 minutes later, Yi Zan sat in the auditorium and quickly guessed that the murderer in this video couldn't help but raise his mouth and said with a smile, "The real murderer here is that one. Sister." Sitting next to Shaolin, hearing Yi Zan's speculation, she couldn't help but ask, "Did you guess it so quickly? It's amazing." At this time, the hostess, who was about to walk back to the host station, saw Matsuo running over from a distance with a sweaty face, and after a few breaths, she stopped and covered her stomach. "Mr. Matsuo, how are you? Why are you sweating profusely? The hostess couldn't help asking. It's nothing, I may have eaten something bad in the morning, and my stomach is a little uncomfortable. Didn't I tell you already? Matsuo forced a smile. Then can you still go on stage? Do you want to see a doctor first? The hostess suggested. Waving his hand, Matsuo showed a smile. It's no big deal, anyway, the show is about to end, so let's finish recording the show first. Chapter 74_shot. Soon, several people on the host stage also walked back. Matsuo picked up the microphone on it, raised a few decibels, and said loudly, I don't know who guessed this time in today's quiz session. The answer. As soon as the voice fell, many people began to raise their hands, wanting to answer this question. Even Xiaolan, who was sitting next to Yizan, quickly raised her hand. Let me answer. Matsuo glanced at the audience, and finally fixed his eyes on Xiaolan, and said with a smile, okay, let this beautiful lady answer the answer this time. Seeing that the designated person was herself, Xiaolan finally showed a smile on her face. She quickly got up with a smile and walked to the host stage. Smiling slightly at Xiaolan, Matsuo said, this beautiful lady, who is the answer you guessed? Xiaolan took the microphone and replied, it should be the sister in the video, I don't know if I guessed it right. Matsuo took the microphone back and said with a smile, this lady guessed it was the sister of the deceased, so did she guess right? Let's watch the big screen together. Afterwards, the big screen in front of the TV quickly jumped a few times, several pictures flashed quickly, and finally it was frozen for a moment. It was the photo of the deceased sister. Wow, this beautiful lady is really smart, and she really guessed it. Matsuo couldn't help but exclaimed tilde. The audience below the stage, because Xiaolan guessed the answer, many people cheered and congratulated her. It is really not easy to guess such a difficult part, ah. Of course, they didn't know that Yizan told her the answer. Soon, the hostess, holding a packaged gift, came over and said to Xiaolan, this time the gift is a commemorative pistol of the detective agency, I hope you will like it. Thank you. Xiaolan took the gift in her hand and showed a smile. The hostess pulled Xiaolan to stand on the stage for a long time, took a few pictures with the camera, and then said to the audience, this gun has a lot of background, but it was a training pistol that Mr. Matsuo used in competitions. You must know that Mr. Matsuo was a shooter back then, his shooting level was comparable to that of international players, and his strength was very strong. These remarks made many viewers excited, but they didn't expect a host to be a shooting master. Soon, the show ended with a burst of cheers, and Xiaolan also took the gift and returned to Yizan's side. Handing the gift box in her hand to Yizan, Xiaolan said with a slight dissatisfaction, what are you doing? I thought it was an exquisite gift. It turned out to be a commemorative pistol. I'll give it to you. After taking the box, Yizan looked around a few times, then smiled and said, this thing is still very well done, why don't you like it, then I will accept it. When the show ended, Yizan took this pistol and went to find Maori with Xiaolan. When several people met, Maori couldn't help patted his stomach, and said a little dejectedly, I didn't expect to be very tired to record a show. I'm so hungry now, so let's go eat first. At this time, Matsuo and the hostess came over and smiled at them. Thank you very much this time, why don't you stay and have a meal together? Hearing that there was a free dinner to eat, of course Maori would not refuse, and quickly said, okay, then we are welcome. Hee, please come with us. The hostess made a gesture of invitation and led the way, bringing Maori and the others over. At this moment, there was a rush of footsteps from a distance, and they were running towards this side quickly. I saw a man wearing a work hat, ran in front of everyone, and said very excitedly, the big thing is bad, something happened to Mr. Tosuke. This sentence was like a heavy hammer, which shocked everyone, and then Matsuo quickly turned around and said, what happened? The staff member in the hat said quickly, that's right, I was going to the editing room to find Mr. Tosuke, but I didn't expect that he wasn't there at all. When I returned, I was in the mail room on the 3rd floor, and sent Mr. Tosuke first. He What's wrong with Tosuke? Matsuo asked very excitedly, and his expression changed a little because of this, even a little hideous. Then the staff member in the hat said, Mr. Tosuke was shot through the head and is already dead. What? Tosuke is dead? As if shocked, Matsuo stepped back several steps in a row, and then came back to his senses and said to the staff member with the hat, take us there quickly. Soon, the group hurried to the mail room on the 3rd floor, and Matsuo rushed in front, as if he was very concerned about this matter. When they came to the mail room, they happened to see that the slightly chubby Dongsuke had collapsed by the window, and his body was covered in blood. There was a bullet hole on his head, and the dead could no longer die. Ah! The hostess couldn't hold herself back in an instant, couldn't help screaming, staggered back a few steps, and then fainted. Although Shaolin is also a girl, she has been with Yizan for a long time, and she has already experienced a lot at the scene of this murder. At this level, there is nothing to be afraid of. Yizan walked forward, surveyed the entire site several times, and found a lot of clues. The body of the deceased Dongsuke seemed to have been moved, and the blood on the side of the window was only limited to the window, and there was no trace on the wall. This situation caused Yizan to fall into contemplation immediately. He glanced back, and looked at the few people on the scene. If someone kills Dongjia, it should be someone he is familiar with. Yizan quickly determined the preliminary speculation in his heart. According to this situation, many of the people present were suspected of crimes, and the most suspect should be Matsuo and the man who found Tosuke's body. Chapter 75_Suspect. When he was in doubt, the person in charge of the TV station also rushed over. As soon as he saw Dongsuke's body, his expression changed. What the hell is going on here? The angry person in charge roared at everyone. The person in charge who came here had a fierce face, and there was a bit of suffocation between his eyebrows, which made the people around him not dare to approach him, and they all had some precautions and tensions. The man who had found Dongsuke's body before, straightened his sun hat, raised his hand and said in a low voice, Guanping-kun, I just passed by this room when I found Mr. Dongsuke's body, and I don't know what happened. Things became Guanping-kun immediately frowned and said in a low voice, then oh no, tell the police what you saw before. After finishing speaking, Guanping picked up his mobile phone, dialed the police station, and said directly to the police officer on the other end of the phone, Hey, is this Officer Mumu? We are a TV station, a murder just happened, please you send someone over right away. Putting away the mobile phone, Guanping's face was very ugly. After all, he is the person in charge here. This is not a good thing for the entire TV station. He has to find a way to solve it. Yizan took all this in his eyes, turned around and said to Xiaolan next to him, what happened here is really strange. Xiaolan also nodded solemnly and said, Yizan, what do you think about this case? Yizan didn't speak, but pouted angrily and looked in Matsuo's direction. Xiaolan was also a smart person, so she naturally knew what Yizan wanted to express. The reason why she didn't ask her father was because Xiaolan knew that her father was only half a bucket of water, and his ability to detect cases was no better than Yizan. Kun, who had walked in before, also found Yizan and the others, and suddenly his expression changed, appearing a little excited. Without too much hesitation, Guanping-kun hurried over, stretched out his hand, and said with a smile, Mr. Maori, the famous detective, why are you here? It's such a surprise. Speaking, Guanping-kun also lowered his voice and asked, Mr. Maori, I want to ask you, do you have any views on this case? After all, Maori still has a certain reputation in society. Once something happens to Guanping-kun, of course, he wants to ask Maori for help. Greeted warmly by Guanping-kun, Maori was still a little excited, so he quickly stretched out his hand and shook it with Guanping-kun. Since he was asked such an initiative question in front of so many people, even if Maori wanted to refuse, he didn't know how to speak. After thinking for a while, Maori's face changed slightly, and then he made a relatively high expression, and then said, This is a TV station, Mr. Tosuke died here so strangely, and he was shot to death. I guess the person who killed him should be a masked gangster. Hearing Maori's words, Guan Ping-kun immediately said with some doubts, "Then, Mr. Maori, why are you so sure that the other party is a masked gangster, not another shape?" "Ah, this." Maori hesitated for a moment, then said, "If you don't cover your face, will someone who dares to do such a bad thing recognize you soon?" For this tough answer, even Guan Ping-kun couldn't help but twitch a few times, not knowing what to say. Yizan, who was on the side, was even more speechless at Maori's answer. He walked directly to Guan Ping-kun and said to him, "In my opinion, the one who can kill Mr. Dongsuk should be someone who is very familiar with him." "People." "Oh, why do you think so?" Guan Ping-kun said with some doubts. Yizan glanced at the people around him, and then said, "If it wasn't for someone who was familiar with Mr. Tosuk, when that person came in to assassinate, he would not have resisted at all. Look, Mr. Tosuk fell to the ground. It went very smoothly, basically without any struggle. There is only one such situation, that is, Dongsuk did not expect that the person who killed him would suddenly shoot him." What Yizan said, Guan Ping-kun's face changed greatly, and he said, "According to what you said, then one of us is a murderer." Nodding slightly, Yizan said, "If you want to say that, there is nothing wrong. After all, it is not so easy for someone who can kill Mr. Dongsuk to enter the scene of the recording program from the outside." Yizan's words seemed to remind Guan Ping-kun, and he suddenly flashed suspicious eyes and looked in the direction of Matsuo. Not only Guan Ping-kun, but also many people present turned their attention to Matsuo. After all, the most suspicious person here must be Matsuo. The one who had the biggest gap with Tosuk was Matsuo. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Matsuo was also a little unhappy, and lowered his voice. "Hey, don't you all suspect that I killed Mr. Tosuk?" Guan Ping didn't say that he doubted him, nor did he say he didn't doubt him, but said indifferently, "When the police arrive, naturally Akatsuki will have a share." During this period of time, Yizan had been observing the movements and expressions of these 2.8 Matsuo. Judging from the situation at the scene, it was very likely that the murderer was Matsuo. After all, among these people, the best marksman was Matsuo, and Tosuk was shot and died. All said, he was the most suspect, and it was understandable. Just when everyone was in a state of suspicion, a siren sounded from a distance. A murder had occurred, and the police's dispatch speed was quite fast. After a while, the police officer Miu Miu, who was wearing a brown cape, rushed over from the outside in a hurry, with a team of police behind him. As soon as Officer Mumu came here, he carefully surveyed the entire scene, and then looked at everyone present. Chapter 76 already the fastest. When he saw Yizan was also here, Officer Mu's eyes showed some excitement, and he couldn't help saying, "Yizan, you are here too, that's great. In this case, I don't have to. I have sent someone to invite you." Speaking of this, Officer Mumu said quickly, "Your reasoning ability is so strong, help me find out who are the most suspect objects in this case." As a police officer, although he has a strong ability to handle cases, it is best to have the help of a detective. All police officers always turn to detectives for help. Although Yizan did not explicitly say that he is a detective, his various abilities have already shown that he is a master of solving cases with high ability. He didn't directly say that he doubted Matsuo, but Yizan still said, "Although I still can't directly determine who the murderer is, I can be sure that the person who killed Mr. Tosuk must be in this room, there is no doubt about it." Quote, "Oh, if that's the case, it might be much easier to handle." Officer Mumu nodded immediately, his eyes became extremely stern, and he looked at these people at the scene. Years of experience in handling cases have made Officer Mumu's eyes very different. For criminals, there is also a certain psychological blow. If the real murderer sees Officer Mumu's eyes, the expression will change somewhat, even it will also be exposed as a result. "Officer, let's check first the time of death of the deceased," Yizan suggested beside him. "Yeah," Officer Mumu nodded, and then conveyed the order to the forensic doctor. After a while, the forensic doctor told the police officer Mumu the result. He nodded and said to Yizan, "According to the forensic doctor's test, the time to kill Mr. Dongsuk should be about this hour. It will not exceed too long." After hearing this, Yizan's brows immediately wrinkled, and then he lowered his voice and said, "So that's the case. If that's the case, then Mr. Dongsuke's death time should be when we were recording the show." Such speculation made Matsuo, who was recording the program at the time, immediately stand up and say, "If you say that, the person who killed Mr. Tosuk should not be us." It's okay that he didn't say this, but when he said this, Yizan became more suspicious of him, looking at him, and always felt that something was wrong. Mori also pulled his chin with his hand for a while, and said in a very puzzled tone, "If that's the case, it seems that Mr. Matsuo really doesn't have time to kill people. He has been recording shows with us all the time before." I always felt that Matsuo's expression were a bit weird. Yizan couldn't help asking, "Then from the beginning to the end, did Mr. Matsuo leave the scene?" When asked this question, Matsuo didn't answer yet, but the hostess who recorded the show with him said without hesitation, "If you say that." When the show was recorded with a prize quiz, Matsuo went to the toilet, he said. "I felt a little sick in my stomach, so I left for a while at that time." Quote. This sentence is undoubtedly like a blockbuster, making everyone look at him immediately, and Mori said excitedly, "It turns out that the murderer is you. Mr. Matsuo, admit it, you must have used the toilet. This gap, and then came here to kill." Being so determinedly designated as a murderer, Matsuo's expression changed immediately. He quickly stepped back and waved his hand quickly. "No, I didn't kill Mr. Matsuo, you are wrong, I am not the murderer." Quote. Yizan also said in a deep voice, "Mr. Matsuo, I have long heard that your marksmanship is very good, and you have a lot of grudges with Mr. Tosuk. You are suspected of being the most promising murderer, and you are also one of them. A very bad thing." Quote. Matsuo, who was already sweating profusely, quickly wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said in an excited tone, "But even if you said that, I killed Mr. Tosuk, but you can think of it from the anchor room. It would take me at least 6 minutes to get to where Mr. Tosuk died, and the tape was only 4 minutes. No matter how fast I was, I might have arrived here in such a short time to kill Tosuk." Such a powerful overthrow argument made Yizan clearly notice that Matsuo's vigorous argument was defending himself. He nodded slightly and said to Officer Mumu, "Since Mr. Matsuo said so, then we might as well do an experiment to see how long it takes to come from there." Officer Mumu also nodded, looked at Maori, and showed a smile. "Brother Maori, it's up to you to do this. I am very optimistic about you." "What, you want me to do it? Why don't you let your hands down?" For this drudgery, Maori didn't want to let himself run around here. 187 waved his hand slightly, and Officer Mumu said, "Our police officers are all trained and have no reference value, and as a detective, Maori, you are still a great detective, so of course, you are the best experimental subject." Quote. Hearing Officer Mumu calling him a famous detective, Maori's expression changed suddenly. He stood up straight and nodded and said, "It's still Officer Mumu's vision. Of course, only I, Maori, have such a challenging task. It can only be completed, then you can see how I can get here in 4 minutes." Quote. After finishing speaking, Maori was accompanied by a few police officers to the previous recording room, and then began to run hard. In order to buy time, Maori really worked hard, and the speed did not stop at all, and kept running forward. But when Maori ran to the place of Mr. Tosuke's death, the stopwatch in the hands of police officer Meguro had counted more than 6 minutes. Officer Mumu, who was slightly dissatisfied, patted his forehead and said, "Can't you run faster?" As soon as he heard this, Maori immediately became furious and said to the police officer Mumu very upset, "I've already run the fastest. If you don't believe me, try it yourself." Chapter 77_Strong Evidence. Does it run fast? The chronograph to Yizan, Officer Mumu had to say, "According to what I said, it takes at least 6 minutes to come here from the place where the program was recorded." Seeing the result, Matsuo breathed a sigh of relief. He put his arms around his chest leisurely, and said indifferently, I said, I can't be a murderer. Although Matsuo said this, Yizan still did not rule out his biggest suspicion. After all, as long as he is a smart murderer, it is very easy to get rid of this suspicion. As long as he finds a shortcut and runs here, it is simply a simple matter. In a mere 4 minutes, there may still be a lot, but according to this situation, there is no strong evidence to prove that Matsuo is the murderer of Tosuke. Soon, everyone withdrew the object of suspicion from Matsuo. After all, no one would want to make enemies with their colleagues. But Yizan doesn't think so. The marksmanship is the best here, and he is the one who has the biggest conflict with Dongsuke. If the murderer is not him, then who is it? Of course, when there is no evidence, Yizan is not good at suspecting anyone, so he can only say to Officer Mumu, Officer, the matter has reached this stage, then please everyone, please provide that you are not present. Proof. Well, then we can only use this exclusion method to determine the identity of the suspect. Officer Mumu nodded and said. Soon, everyone provided the evidence that was not present at the time. After all, this is the key to determining the case. When a police officer asked where Ono was, Ono immediately said, I also went to the reference room to put things, and then I passed through this room and happened to find Mr. Tosuke's body. This answer immediately made Yizan's face change, and he looked at Xiaoyi's body. I saw Ono wearing a sun hat, and he seemed to be afraid of the sun. He kept his head down, as if he didn't want to meet other people. What was even more strange was that he also wore a lot of clothes, which was more difficult than when they were present. People have to have more. Just these strange images made Yizan suddenly puzzled, and looking at the appearance of the colleagues around him, it seemed that they didn't like talking to him very much. Could it be that the murderer may also be him, but what is his motive? Yizan couldn't help thinking. When the police finished asking, they couldn't help but say, then your answer is equivalent to having no alibi, because no one can prove that you were not there at the time. This sentence immediately reminded Yizan, which changed his expression. He couldn't help thinking, yes, it was Ono who found Dongsuke's body. When he was here alone, it was the best time to commit the crime. So the one who killed Tosuke was probably Ono. Ouch, my stomach hurts. At this moment, Matsuo, who was standing by the side for interrogation, suddenly clutched his stomach and wailed beside him. Officer Miu Miu immediately turned his eyes away a little unhappily, and said in a low voice, you really don't pull in early, don't pull in late, but at this time, let's go. With the sound of his stomach rumbling, Matsuo hurriedly ran towards the toilet. Looking at his appearance, it didn't seem like he was pretending. In this situation, Yizan's brows couldn't help but wrinkle slightly, and he quickly said to the hostess, what did you all eat before recording the show? The hostess is a relatively honest woman, and she doesn't dare to hide anything in front of the police. As long as she is asked about her problems and how much she knows, she will tell the truth. We just drank a cup of coffee in the morning and didn't eat the rest, replied the hostess. Yizan frowned slightly, and then said, can I trouble you, bring up that cup of coffee and let me take a look. No problem. The hostess nodded, then turned around and walked out of the room, fetching the cup of coffee from the place where the show was recorded. After taking the cup of coffee that Matsuo had drunk, Yizan picked it up and smelled it, and immediately there was a strong smell that rushed into his nostrils. But in this taste, there is another slightly more sour taste, but this taste is very light, and most people can't notice it at all. But Yizan's strength is strong, and this kind of small skill is not difficult for him at all, and he found this out easily. Afterwards, Yizan said to the hostess, who brought this cup of coffee here. After recalling a little, the hostess replied, I remember that in the morning, Mr. Ono was responsible for delivering this cup of coffee. He personally brought the coffee over to us. Is that so? Yizan showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth, and then said, if this is the case, then things will be easier to handle. Turning around again, Yizan looked at Xiaoyi, took the coffee in his hand in front of him, and said in a low voice, then can you tell me why you put laxatives in the coffee? Yizan's words surprised many of the people present. He didn't expect Jack to smell it like this, and he knew that there was laxative in the coffee. At this time, Ono's expression also became very ugly. His face was pale, and he didn't seem to think that Yizan would find out about these things. But even so, in front of so many people, Ono still waved his hand and said excitedly, "No, it's not the laxative I gave at all. When I brought this coffee, it was already like this." "Oh, is this what it is?" Yizan said indifferently with the corners of his mouth raised. Regarding Xiaoyi's stubbornness, Yizan then asked, "Then why can't you produce strong evidence to prove that you were not there at the time?" As if he had prepared his lines long ago, Ono didn't even hesitate, and said, "That's because I passed by and no one saw it, so I couldn't show an alibi, but even so, you can't. It means that I am the murderer." Quote. Chapter 78_struggle. Officer Mew Mew also interjected at this time, "Yes, Yizan, according to the standards of the judgment, under these conditions, it is still impossible to determine that he is the murderer. Indeed, if just because of these reasons, it would not be enough to convince the public at all." Yizan smiled lightly and suddenly said, "Mr. Ono, I didn't say you were the murderer. Why are you so nervous? Relax." Already in a state of tension, how can Ono relax, be suspected of being a murderer, and calm down? That is really amazing. At this moment, Matsuo came out of the bathroom, and while covering his stomach, he walked over and said to everyone weakly, "By the way, I suddenly remembered something. Some time ago, Ono seemed to be still with Dong. Mr. Jia quarreled." This sentence, like a stone falling into the water, immediately caused a layer of ripples, and Yizan quickly said, "What the hell is going on? Do you know the reason?" Matsuo shook his head and said, "I don't know the specific situation, but I vaguely heard a sentence or two. It seems that it is about to be fired. It seems that because 830 Ono did something wrong, Mr. Tosuk will take him from TV station fired." Yizan immediately turned his head and said to Ono, "Mr. Ono, is there really such a thing?" Ono, who originally wanted to refute, suddenly rolled his eyes and nodded his head. "Yes, it is true. Mr. Matsuo saw it right. I did quarrel with Mr. Tosuk. The reason is because of my job. If the ability is not outstanding, Dongsuk will fire me, and in the end, the two of us quarreled." As if to remedy something, Ono still said, "But after we quarreled, we didn't mention it again, and Mr. Tosuk didn't fire me." "So it is." Yizan nodded slightly and didn't say much. On the contrary, it was Maori, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, with an excited look on his face, and said loudly, "In my opinion, the murderer is you. Because you had something unpleasant with Tosuk, you held a grudge, and took advantage of today's opportunity to kill Tosuk." Maori speculated in a self-proclaimed sense. "No, it's not like that." Ono quickly retorted, "How could I kill Dongsuk for this reason?" When Maori was arguing with Ono, Yizan was already secretly sending a text message to number 18 on his mobile phone, asking her to check the specific information of Ono. After a while, Yizan received a long receipt on his mobile phone, all about the Ono in front of him, and of course, some records of his recent activities. When reading this text message, Yizan suddenly let out a sneer, stretched out his hand and pointed in front of Ono, and said, "Admit it, Ono-kun, you killed Mr. Tosuk." The affirmation of this sentence surprised everyone, and when they looked at Ono-kun, they were all puzzled. Yizan snorted coldly and said, "The reason why you killed Dongjia, of course, was not because he wanted to fire you, but because he discovered your secret and asked you to extort a sum of money. You held a grudge, and then started murder." What? This sentence was like a bolt from the blue, and it hit Xiaoyi like this, causing his face to change a few times, then staggering backwards, and finally sat down on the chair. The expression on his face was tense. "You, what nonsense are you talking about? How could I kill Mr. Dongsuk because of this? It's ridiculous." Ono didn't admit what Yizan said at all, and was still trying to refute it. When things had reached this point, Yizan didn't have any hesitation. he ran directly in front of Ono, ran directly in front of him, and then pulled his clothes off with all his might. T-shirt that Ono was wearing inside was revealed. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was not the t-shirt on Ono's body, but a black pistol on his waist. Yizan suddenly stretched out his hand and took the pistol in his hand. He opened it at will and glanced at it, and he clearly found that there were a total of 10 bullets in the pistol, 3 of which were knocked out, and now there are only 7 remaining. Particles. HMPH, Ono, what else do you have to say? The number of bullets that disappeared from your pistol matches the number of bullets at the scene. Yizan snorted coldly. Actually, you are the real murderer. Unexpectedly, at the last moment, his conspiracy was still exposed. Ono's whole body softened, and the whole person felt as if he had been smashed by something, and he lost his strength. Sitting on the chair, Ono let out a long sigh, raised his head with a bleak smile, and said helplessly, I thought it was flawless, and I could even kill people with a knife, but I didn't expect it to be revealed in the end. Under the light, Yizan's figure suddenly became a little taller, and he said very forcefully, in this world, only justice is eternal, you evil fellows will always be brought to justice. Well, Yizan didn't even think about it, he did less evil things. It's okay to say that to others. However. Okay, that's really good. Officer Mew Mew praised Yizan. The current situation has been able to accurately explain that it was Ono who killed Tosuk. In order to cover up something, he chose to kill Tosuk. Taking a step forward, Yizan asked, Xiaoyi, I have always wanted to ask you a question. What did Dongsuk find out about you? You want to kill him like this? Because Ono was about to say what he wanted to say, when suddenly, halfway through the words, the whole person's movements changed, and he flashed back to the side, and quickly took out the gun from his waist. Holding the black pistol in his hand, Ono aimed the muzzle at the crowd and shouted, Everyone don't come over. If you take one step further, I will shoot. The surrounding police, in their habitual movements, also took out their guns from their waists and held them against Ono. Chapter 79 _ Come to the rescue. Hey, what are you doing now, are you looking for death? Officer Mew Mew snorted coldly, not afraid that the muzzle of the gun would be aimed at him, and still walked forward. Don't come here. Ono held the hand at the muzzle of the gun, becoming a little trembling, and his eyes were a little ruthless, but he didn't dare to shoot. Suddenly, the bolder Ono rushed to the side quickly, grabbed the hostess, grabbed her, pointed the pistol at the hostess, and yelled at the crowd, Who are you? If she dares to come over, I'll shoot her in the head. Such severe intimidation made the people around him nervously glance over here, and did not dare to move around casually, for fear of accidentally angering Ono, making him mad, and a shot would collapse in his hand till the hostages. Don't be impulsive, just say whatever you have to say. At this time, Officer Mumu had to bow his head and persuade Ono with good words, for fear that he might act too aggressively. Even the hostess who was kidnapped by him sobbed twice and said in a very sad tone, Ono, we have been working together for so long, I didn't expect you to be such a person, do you have to kill me? This sentence made Ono, who was holding the pistol, slightly moved, but his heart had become ruthless, his eyes suddenly sank again, and he lowered his voice and said, There is no way, it is you who forced me to this step, as long as I'm fine, you'll be fine. Hey, who knows? Just after he finished speaking, a black light quickly flew over from a distance. The speed of this ray of light was terrifyingly fast, and before everyone could see what it was, it had already reached Ono's forehead and slammed his head into it quickly. Shish! This black light immediately hit Ono's forehead, and another black thing rushed out from behind Ono's forehead. Ono, who was hit by this blow, screamed, and then his body quickly retreated back, staggered several times in a row, and then hit the wall. Bang! Ono's body lay down very weakly, leaning on the wall, a trace was drawn, and then he was half lying on the ground with his hands hanging beside him. Taking advantage of this time, the surrounding policemen rushed over and quickly took the gun from Ono's hand. At this time, a small hole had appeared on Xiaoyi's head, and the blood inside was constantly flowing out, and the whole person's appearance became a little scary. The blood couldn't stop, and Ono's body was also twitching violently, as if he was dying at any time. And everyone looked over to Yizan's side. The blow just now was exactly what he sent, and Officer Mew Mew said in surprise, "Yizan, what weapon did you just use? We didn't even look at it. Did not see clearly." Killing people to save people in times of crisis, Jack can be regarded as justifiable defense. This is entirely to rescue the hostess. Of course, Yizan didn't actually use any weapons at all, he just used a normal chi to kill Ono. But in front of Officer Mew Mew, Yizan naturally wouldn't say that. He smiled lightly and said, "This is a secret weapon I bought not long ago. It can save my life in times of crisis. See the situation today. In an emergency, I took it out and used it." Quote. So it is. Officer Mumu nodded understandingly. For him, he had seen many rich people prepare secret weapons for himself, which was not surprising. Seeing that Ono was about to die, Yizan walked over slowly, came to him, and asked, "You haven't told me what secret Dongsuk has discovered about you, and you want to kill him like this." Quote. The most terrifying thing for people is curiosity. Yizan is now aroused by Ono's question, and now he wants to ask clearly, and he doesn't want to let him die like this. Seeing Yizan walking towards Xiaoyi, Officer Mew Mew said involuntarily, "He is a murderer, be careful." Yizan turned his back to Police Officer Mumu, shook his head slightly, and said, "Don't worry, he has lost the ability to kill, I'm fine." Ono, who was lying on the ground about to die, showed a very ugly smile, and then said, "Actually, I stole some funds from the TV station and was discovered by Dongsuk. He threatened me and asked me to give him half of it. I was afraid that he would call the police. Kill him. It turns out that all the problems are due to this simple reason, and of course, this reason is also very powerful, powerful enough for a person to kill. Alas, everything stems from desire." Yizan couldn't help but sighed with emotion. After saying these words, Ono finally let out his last breath, but he didn't take another breath. He slowly closed his eyes and didn't move. Seeing the two corpses on the ground, everyone couldn't help but sigh. They were all living peacefully, but they were broken by these things. The case has been solved, and the police officer Mew Mew also quickly asked his subordinates to clean up the scene and clean up all the things left behind. Moreover, those places that have been damaged also need to be cleaned up again, and many people have to stay and give a new confession. Mr. Matsuo, who stood aside for a long time, was also deeply shocked by this incident, and he was also sweating a lot. But even so, Matsuo slowly walked in front of Yizan and bowed deeply to him. "Thank you so much, Yizan." Turning around and looking at Matsuo, Yizan lowered his voice so that only the two of them could hear him and said, "You can do it yourself. Crime is not something everyone wants to do." Hearing this, Matsuo's expression couldn't help but be shocked. It seemed that there was some secret that Yizan discovered, but he dared to say more, so he nodded without saying a word. Yi Shuink remembered that in the original book, Matsuo killed Tosuk, but this time, he was probably too late to act, but was robbed by others. It is also possible that it was the appearance of Yizan that changed everything. Chapter 80 _ The case is over, watch the movie. After all, the case was over, and it was pointless to think about it so much. At least Yizan knew that after Matsuo knew his warning, he would no longer be a murderer. "Yizan, your reasoning ability is really strong." Officer Mew Mew walked over and couldn't help but admire. After speaking, Officer Mumu turned his head and said to Maori, "Brother Maori, you should also learn more from Yi Xuanshui. His talent is comparable to that of a real detective." When the police officer Mumu said this, Maori scratched his head a little embarrassedly, and said with a laugh, Yes, I will ask Yizan for more advice in the future." After all, since so many things happened, the cases that Yizan has solved are far more powerful than Mao Li, and they are all solved very quickly. This kind of ability is regarded as a master in the detective world. In front of such a master, Mao Li had to admire him. If he was asked to solve these cases, it might take a lot of trouble, and it might not even be successful. However, Xiaolin looked at the corpse and bloodstains at the scene, which made Xiaolin feel very uncomfortable. She couldn't help but step back several steps, her brows furrowed together. She turned her head to look at Yi Zan. No knowing what was going on, Mao Lilan, who was originally very strong in her heart, looked very weak when Yi Zan was by her side. Well, maybe this is the origin of the little woman. And Yi Zan, who has always put his mind on Mao Lilan, has long seen these things, so he said to others, the case has been solved, let's go back first. Since Yi Zan was going to leave, it was not easy for others to stop him, so they had to agree to let him leave. Outside the door, there were already a lot of reporters. They all broadcasted through the TV station, and when they knew what happened inside, they all wanted to come in an interview. After staying in the TV building for a while, Yi Zan and Xiaolin still had a profit and got off the elevator, ready to go back first. Wow, isn't that Yi Zan, a very famous detective recently? As soon as he walked out of the door, a reporter recognized Yi Zan and hurriedly shouted. A shout came out, and the other reporters turned around one after another. Looking at Yi Zan, everyone's expressions were so surprised and exaggerated, and they ran over in a hurry. Seeing so many reporters, the expression of Mao Lilan next to Yi Zan changed slightly. Mao Lilan, who had not experienced this, was still a little scared. Seeing this, Yi Zan suddenly stretched out his hand to grab Xiaolin, and Yi Zan said, let's go. On the other hand, there are just too many reporters here. Quote. When Yi Zan suddenly held her hand, Xiaolin couldn't help but tremble slightly. She felt a warm current in her body, which was a feeling she had never experienced before. Raising her head slightly, Xiaolin glanced at Yi Zan, only to realize that the man in front of her was so handsome that her little face couldn't help but look yuhi. Yeah, nodding lightly, Xiaolin followed behind Yi Zan, ready to leave. Yi Zan pulled Maori's clothes and said to him, Uncle, I'll leave it to you, Xiaolin and I will go first. Seeing Yi Zan and Xiaolin holding hands together, Maoli quickly smiled and said, Okay, you guys go first, it's enough to have me here alone. Facing so many reporters alone, Maoli not only was not nervous at all, on the contrary, he was a little excited. In Maoli's opinion, this was a good opportunity for him to show his face. After tidying up his bow tie and suit, Maori opened his arms to block the excited reporters, and said with a smile, Mr. Reporters, if you have any questions, just ask me. Kogoro Maori, I'm also a famous detective, and I just went inside. What happened? I was there, I knew everything like the back of my hand. Quote. Although these reporters really wanted to interview Yi Zan, but seeing that Yi Zan and Xiaolin had already left and couldn't catch up, these reporters took the next step and started to interview Maori. Surrounded by so many reporters, Maori was still very happy, answering their questions carefully one by one. At this time, Yi Zan, who had left here through another door, took Xiaolin to the street, and the two wandered aimlessly on the street. It's been a long time since I walked around the streets of this modern city. Yi Zan really didn't know where to go next. When I looked up, I saw a few hundred meters ahead, there was a tall shopping building with several signs hanging on it, all of which were movies that had just been released recently. By the way, Xiaolin, it's not too late, let's go to a movie. Yi Zan made a suggestion. The closer she got to Yi Zan, the more Xiaolin found her inner changes. Although she wanted to go home now, Yi Zan was by her side, so she nodded involuntarily, and then said, okay. Then let's go to the movies. Soon, Yi Zan and Xiaolin came to the cinema and bought 2 tickets for the new movie, ready to watch. Picking up the ticket in her hand, Xiaolin said involuntarily, there's still half an hour to go before the show starts, we might as well go buy something to eat first. Okay, Yi Zan nodded, then went to the counter that sold snacks with Xiaolin, and went to buy something to eat first, so that when watching a movie later, he could have something to eat. Are quite a lot of people watching the movie 4.2. There are almost 100 people waiting for admission outside, and there are also many people queuing up to buy food. As soon as Yizan and Shaolin got behind the vending machine, they stood behind a young girl. The young girl was tall and slender, wearing a black tight skirt, which fully showed her bumpy figure. A pair of high heels of more than 10 centimeters added a bit of temperament to her. With such a beautiful woman in front, the men beside her couldn't help but take a few more glances, and some were even discussing in private, looking like they were just around the corner. At this moment, a thin, wretched man walked slowly from behind. He was wrapped in a coat and looked a little nondescript.